Hello, I'm Dr. Stephen Hassan with another episode of the Influence Continuum. And for my regular listeners, you know that so much of my content is about the dark side of the influence continuum and how people are being hurt by other people. But I also relish the opportunity to share an expert on sleep, Dr. Lauren Broch, in this episode, because frankly, we all are sleep deprived, and it appears to me. So, Dr. Lauren Broch, I will disclose, is my sister-in-law. I've known her for 25 years. She is an expert of experts, and that's why I asked her to join us. Uh, Dr. Lauren Broch, you are a clinical psychologist, nutritionist. You have deep interests in sleep and sleep disorders. You are board certified in sleep disorders medicine and behavioral sleep medicine. You have a private practice in health psychology at Greenwich Hospital in Connecticut, as well as Northwell Health Sleep Disorders Center in New Hyde Park, New York. You also have a master's in nutrition. You have a holistic approach, and you especially enjoy working with women to optimize their physical and emotional health. You're a published author, expert, and Dr. Lauren, you know my story. I was sleeping 3 to 4 hours a night, 7 days a week in the Moonies, and I really couldn't think for myself, and a lot of people think, 6 hours is fine or 5 hours is fine, but I think we all know that we need more sleep and we need to wake up rested. So let me just ask you to define the common sleep disorders maybe that you see in your practice, what the symptoms are, and we'll take it from there. Thank you for joining us.
Great. It's such a pleasure to be here. Well, let's see. The common sleep disorders that I see would be, first of all, insomnia. And I guess that everybody can relate to that. At least 50% of the population experiences at least a poor night or several poor nights of sleep on some regular basis. And about anywhere between 10 to 15% have chronic sleep problems, meaning insomnia, problems falling asleep, staying asleep, not feeling rested. And I would say that is the bulk of my practice, is treating people with insomnia for all different reasons. And we can get into what we look at, what are the kinds of questions, what am I interested in, how do I understand it. But another sleep disorder that is quite common is also sleep apnea, and very different. Although, again, it's a problem with sleep. And so when people have sleep apnea, they're having problems breathing during sleep because the physiology changes during sleep. And so an apnea is defined as a partial or complete closure of the back of the throat, which obviously anyone can imagine is not a good thing. And it has to happen for at least 10 seconds or longer to be considered an apnea. But this doesn't happen just one time a night, because all of us have some apneas per night. It's when it happens over and over and over again. And that becomes a problem. It obviously is a problem.
I didn't realize that we all can have a moment where we stop breathing. That's really fascinating to me. I just want to be on the record. I've never had problem falling asleep, but my issue is waking up after 3 or 4 hours and my mind is racing about work or, some, stressor or something. And I've had to really do sleep hygiene, which I'm going to ask you next to go into.
Absolutely.
For the average person. Before I ask you to respond, is it true that we need 7 to 9 hours on average of sleep? I know there's some differences with people, but is it true that restorative sleep, we really need it for our immune system, and that a lot of Americans are sleep deprived?
Yes. So, that has been looked at over and over and over again, and it really does appear that probably most of us need about 7 to 8 hours. But,
Mm-hmm.
that would probably be the average, I would say, or the range of the average. But then,
Yes.
as everything is distributed, some people can actually do fine with 6 hours. Uh, I don't know about five, but perhaps six. That would, and some others 9 or 10. So, but those
Mm-hmm.
people are rare. Most of us need
Mm-hmm.
7 to 8 hours. But, the data is overwhelming in showing that, many people are not getting that.
Right. And issues like they don't go to bed the same time, or it's too hot in the room. Like, talk about some of the things that can help us get some good habits,
Sure,
so we can have proper sleep.
absolutely. So, of course, there are many principles that will optimize sleep, and a lot of them fall under the category of sleep hygiene. And probably some of the more important ones are to keep a regular sleep and wake schedule.
Mm-hmm.
So for instance, if it's 10 to 6 or 7, 11, 11, somewhere in that ballpark. Um, some people are guilty of spending too much time in bed and other people too little, but
Mm.
keeping regular schedules or varying their schedules. And there's
Mm-hmm.
something known as social jet lag, which is what many people are guilty of, where during the week they are curtailing their sleep. They're not getting enough sleep. They're maybe
Mm.
going to sleep at 11 or midnight or 1 and having to get up for work. So they are not getting enough sleep on a regular basis. And then on the weekend, sleeping in. And we call that social jet lag because they're actually altering their rhythm of sleep
Mm.
during the weekends versus the week. And it's almost as if they're flying to California,
Mm.
and then coming back to New York on a Sunday night to a Monday morning. So,
So is it true that there is no such thing as sleep debt? Because people say, well, I'll make it up on the weekend. It's really better to get up at the same time and try to go to sleep at the same time, right?
absolutely. Within, a reasonable boundary, I would say. I mean, look, if you're sleeping a little more, half hour more on a weekend, sure, that's okay. But it's really when people really extend their sleep on weekends and are really, not getting enough sleep on weeknights. That's not good because then
Mm-hmm.
they really are
Mm-hmm.
changing the rhythm of their sleep. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And is it true that it's good not to do vigorous exercise before you go to sleep? And it's a good thing to turn off your phone an hour or two before you go to sleep and like not even have your phone in your bedroom?
Yes. 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 um, it's nearly impossible to tell a teenager not to do these things,
Mm.
unfortunately. And in a technological society, it's very hard to get everything out of the picture, but we do what we can. And certainly, going along with sleep hygiene, it's keeping regular sleep and wake hours. It's making the room dark. So any lights, having Alexa going off in the middle of the night or any other lights, not good because light, especially the blue light, is what we understand. The blue wavelength in light inhibits melatonin release. So we don't like that. We don't need that at night.
Mm.
That's not going to help us sleep
Mm.
well. And keeping it dark, quiet, not drinking much caffeine. And if you do, really cutting it off by noon or 2 or 3, depending on whether you have sleep issues or
Mm.
not. Certainly not drinking that much. Alcohol, also not very good for sleep. It may sedate you initially, but then it can wake you up. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then the devices. The devices are a real challenge. The Netflix, the pandemic, all were, challenges to our sleep.
Yeah, I don't have a TV in my bedroom, but I know a lot of people do. And what sayeth thou, sleep expert?
Well, I do say I'm not as strict with people who are sleeping well. So I say if it's not a problem, it's not a problem. But of course, no one should be falling asleep to the TV at night. That's not good. And I
Mm-hmm.
have many patients who come in and tell me, well, I need, they may be lonely, they may be widowed, they're older. They fall asleep to the TV, but guess what? It wakes them up at some point and they have to turn it off.
Mm.
And usually at
Mm-hmm.
a point where they're more vulnerable if they wake up to then have trouble falling back to sleep.
Got
So,
it.
right. So, your problem with sleep maintenance is probably the more common one, and certainly the
Mm-hmm.
one I see mostly. Not to say I don't see falling problems with falling asleep, but staying asleep is really more of an issue and common because we also our sleep is packaged in 90-minute cycles. So we go
Oh,
through,
tell us.
yeah.
Yeah, please explain.
Sleep is quite predictable and it unfolds over the night in this cyclic pattern of first having non-REM sleep, then REM, then non-REM, and REM. So we cycle back and forth. And each
Mm-hmm.
cycle of sleep, which is about 90 minutes long, it can vary for a person, but within a person, between people, but not within. Usually, each of us have a genetic predisposition to whatever our cycle of sleep is going to be. And so as we go through the night through cycles, we have more REM, less non-REM through cycles. So we do dream more in the morning. We are having more REM sleep in the morning with more
And that
cycles.
REM stands for rapid eye movement.
Yes.
Is that, am
Yes.
I remembering correctly? And that's the restorative, deeper sleep?
Well,
Is it
guess what?
close?
It's all deep. It's all needed. It's all needed.
Uh-huh.
And we used to think that REM was really where all of our learning and memory storage was occurring, but it turns out it's also occurring during non-REM. There are
Mm-hmm.
lighter stages of non-REM but stage two, which is stage two non-REM sleep, we also are sort of having dreamlike mentation, but we're not having the same type of dreams that are vivid, more intense, and more complicated, really, that we have in REM sleep. But all
Mm-hmm.
sleep serves a function, and we need all of it. So it's all
Mm-hmm.
restorative, really.
So I want to just say in my practice, when people ask me for help, I'll often ask at the beginning, like, how are you sleeping? Are you exercising? Are you eating, nutritionally, etc. But I'm astounded how many people have sleep disorders. And some people say I haven't slept well for 2 weeks, and some people say I haven't slept well for years.
Mm-hmm.
And especially those people who are like having major disturbances where they're hallucinating, they're having delusions, they think the guru is visiting them at night, or they're having, repetitive nightmarish dreams about the cult.
Yeah.
It's a major piece that we want to get them to figure out how to go to sleep and go deep into sleep and wake up refreshed. For anyone listening, if you're a former member, especially, like, really pay attention to this, please, because it's so vital to your mental well-being and your functionality. Um, I do have another question. I use melatonin at night, and I heard there was a recent meta study that was questioning how useful melatonin is. I'm kind of, honestly, it's a habit now that I just like to pop a 2.5. I put my night guard in because I used to grind. I don't grind anymore, but I do that. What's the latest you hear about melatonin research?
Right. Melatonin is a hormone, and we call it the hormone of darkness because we secrete it at night, or we secrete it when it's dark. And so, as I
Mm-hmm.
indicated before, um, if there's light in the rooms, the night lights that people used to have are actually not so good for melatonin release, and so not so good for sleep. And what we
Mm-hmm.
understand about melatonin, either the endogenous, what we produce, what we
Yep.
naturally, and then the exogenous, what we take in,
Yeah.
is that it helps signal sleep. So it's
Mm-hmm.
kind of a signaler of sleep, and helps sort of support the circadian rhythm.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not a wonderful sedative. But
Mm-hmm.
having said that, it has some sedative effects and it can help with sleep onset, but it's really more for helping the circadian rhythm. And I say priming the pump of the circadian
Mm-hmm.
rhythm. So I am
Mm-hmm.
actually for melatonin and I use it.
Yay.
Yes, keep doing it. And
Uh,
look, with everything, there are probably things we don't know about the downside. And, some of the things that we do understand is there's variability in in how much melatonin is actually in some products. And, that came out a few years of meta-analysis, as well as sort of the quality of it. But if you have a trusted brand and
mm,
you've been using it for a while, I say that's fine. I say try to keep
mm-hmm.
it below 5 or 5 and less, because
Yeah.
most of us do not need more. And in fact, there's indications that maybe even less, but, like zero point 0.1. But in my practice, I probably recommend 2 to 3 milligrams. So you're right there in that pocket.
Yeah. Yay. I found that when I was taking 5, I would be like kind of groggy in the morning. So I stopped that. And I do the sublingual one that I pop in. I don't know how it is for my teeth because I put it in after I brush my teeth at night. So maybe that's not great. Anyway, back to sleep. So, um, say a little bit more about circadian rhythms, maybe mention about people who have these jobs where they have to work at night and shift work and the problems with that, please.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, if I have to say one of the most exciting, I think, areas in sleep and in medicine and in health is probably circadian rhythms. And I think
Mm,
it's going to be something that we understand impacts our health in ways we really just didn't understand before. So, what is a
mm,
circadian rhythm? Circa means about, and Dian, the Dian, means a day. So, a circadian rhythm is about a day. We have other rhythms. We
mm-hmm,
have an ultradian rhythm. There are other kinds of rhythms, but lots of things run on a circadian rhythm. And so it's
mm-hmm,
about a day. And why do I say about a day? Because it turns out it's not exactly a day. It's 24.2 hours on average, which is a little more
mm,
than a day, or at least where the light and dark cycle is now. Interesting.
mm-hmm,
I read somewhere. I think we are slowing down the light and dark outside. So now it's 24 hours, but I think it
mm,
slows down. I can't remember by how many seconds a century. So that just
mm,
happens to be what it is now, 24 hours.
mm. Interesting.
Right. But our internal rhythm is on average about 24.2. So every day we have to reset our internal clock to match the outside world. And we do that with light. Light is one of the main zeitgebers or time givers that resets our internal clock and says, hey, you got to go back to 24 hours. So a lot of things
Mm-hmm,
run on a circadian rhythm. And we really need the light outside every morning to see it about the same time to reset our internal clock to the outside world. And so
mm-hmm,
hormones run on a 24-hour cycle. Sleep wake runs on a 24-hour cycle. Our temperature rhythm, which goes up a little, goes down a little,
mm,
runs on a 24-hour. There's so many things. So I think in the future, we're going to understand that so much better and use it to deliver medications at different times that'll be optimized when they're more effective. Surgeries, it turns out, it's better to have certain surgeries at certain times of day because of our physiology. So, there's a lot of implications of circadian rhythm. Eating, we certainly know with fasting and how to sort of that also
uh-huh,
is a circadian rhythm. So, so living in rhythm with our circadian rhythm is important. And that's why keeping regular sleep and wake hours, keeping it dark when it's supposed to be dark, not having stimulating things, devices, are certainly can be a problem. And, being active during the day, being physically active, being emotionally connected. But in the evening, winding down. So, sort of in answer to sort of what you described, you sleep for several hours and you're sleeping a few cycles of sleep. And usually we're vulnerable after 2 or 3 cycles of sleep, which are, again, 90 minutes, an hour and a half each, maybe to wake up. And now we've gotten sort of the very critical beginning of sleep. And now our mind can take over because we do wake up after cycles of sleep. It's just going right back down into sleep. And so I think I'm more understanding that what we do during the day and how we sort of unburden ourselves of the things we're involved in the day, in the evening is so important. So I would say, spending time thinking about things. I sometimes say a worry list of what are the things that are on your mind today. Think about them. Do a data dump of that. And then if they come up at nighttime, you say, no, I thought about that. I don't need to think about that now.
Yes, that's a great strategy. Writing down before you go to sleep whatever issues are on your mind. That definitely helps me a lot.
Absolutely. And, when being disciplined and saying, I don't need to think about that now. I can really, I thought about that and I'll think about that tomorrow. And so, certainly that. And when I talk about restricted hours in bed, what I mean is, so what I tell people to do is to do a sleep log for 2 weeks. Because when people tell you, well, this is how I sleep, it turns out it's plus or minus that. One night they sleep 4 hours, another night they sleep 6 or 7 hours. They may make up. So it's not the same. And so if you do it for 2 weeks, you get a better sense of what's the average. And so first, when you look at that, you can say, well, okay, I see I vary what time I get into bed, or I vary what time I get out of bed. So that's information. And I also, sometimes it's 3 hours and wow, that I get that makeup night where I get 7 hours. Neither of those are what you want. You want to have some average of those two. And so let's say it's 6 or 6.5 hours, which, or 5 or so. Spend only 6.5 or 7 hours in bed. At first, so let's say, for instance, you make it be 11 to 6:30. You do that for 2 weeks to a month. It's called sleep compression or sleep restriction. It's hard to do, and at first you will sleep less, but over time you will start sleeping more in that rhythm. So you don't want the highs or lows of sleep. You want to sleep about the same every night. So that's what we're talking about when we talk about sort of compressing it or spending less time in bed. And
because there's a lot of people who will, hang out in bed for 12 hours and they never get that restorative place. And they're, going in and out of light states of trance or whatever. But that's not what the body really is craving and needing to restore itself.
I say, and so another part of it also is, and we call this stimulus control, which is they start associating other things with bed and with nighttime. And so some of the things can be in this kind of sort of betwixt and between state. They're not asleep, they're not awake, somewhere in between. They're kind of a little hallucinating. It's, because they're sort of in a sleepy state, or they're worrying. And then
ruminating is terrible.
Exactly.
It's not a good thing to do when you're trying to sleep at all.
It's not good.
Yeah, I have some clients that are worried about a loved one in a cult, and I literally have to assign them worry time throughout the day, 5-minute blocks where they're not allowed to have any positive thoughts. They only can, catastrophize and worry about what's going wrong. but that compartmentalizes the worry and it releases that. And I say, think about, is there any new information that you can do something different? Great. If there isn't, if you're just doing the same old, that's not helping you
Absolutely.
to be functional.
Right.
That's going to harm your relationship. Talk to me about if you have a partner with a restless leg. I'm interested in exploring some things. I also want to ask you about Fitbits and other types of rings and
Sure.
devices that are being promoted to consumers.
Sure. So restless legs is absolutely another sleep disorder I'll see, and it becomes more prevalent as we get older. We think it has to do, at least in part, with iron transfer into the brain, and so. But what it is it is a feeling that your legs are uncomfortable. Could be creepy crawly, could just be from the inside out, just feeling uncomfortable sensations. But if you have it, you know what I'm talking about. and it doesn't happen at any given time during the day. It happens, number one, when you're sedentary. And number two, it has a circadian rhythm. So there's that word again, phrase. It happens in the evening and at nighttime. So as you can imagine, that's not great for sleep. Right. And so it affects usually falling asleep. It can affect the evening. People will say they're watching TV and they can't stop moving their legs. So the other part of it is that movement helps. It helps the sensation, but that again is counter to sleep. You can't be moving. And if you are, you're, not getting great sleep. You're, fragmenting your sleep, and you're also probably affecting your bed partner as well. So, that's restless legs. And it, like I said, it increases. Probably at least 25% of people over 65 have restless legs to some extent.
And is there a treatment for that per
se? Right. There's different reasons. One, like I said, could be iron. And so the first thing is to get blood work done, to have your doctor look at your ferritin levels, which is your storage of iron. And you can take oral iron. You can take iron supplements with vitamin C to help the absorption. That could be one. If it's mild, sometimes activity like earlier in the day, exercising can help it. But when it's more severe, we unfortunately have to turn to prescription medications like gabapentin, Lyrica. Those are ones that can help, calcium channel, receptors.
And talk a little bit more. You just mentioned blood tests. Talk about sleep tests and when those are indicated. Like if someone's listening, when they want to do a consult with someone like yourself who is a sleep expert.
Well, these days, it has become much easier to have a sleep test. And in a way, it's not really a sleep test. They call it a home sleep apnea test. And what that is a test. It's a little box with sensors that you bring home, and it's really just for breathing. So it's just to look for sleep apnea, which again is very common, very prevalent, up to 15 to 20% of men, and about 5% of women, especially menopausal, can have sleep apnea. And that has implications cardiovascular, metabolically. So, you certainly want to have a home sleep apnea test. And all you need to do is tell your doctor, I snore, or my bed partner notices I gasp, or I am very sleepy during the day. Those would be the symptoms. And it's covered by Medicare. And so it is a very important test just to have. That is just a breathing test, really, for sleep.
So do they send it to you and you send it back after you do it for a night or two, or how does that work?
Yes, it can be that way, or it can be you pick it up at, a sleep disorder center, and then drop it off the next day. The following day, they download the data and then you get the results in a few weeks.
I see. This is new information for me because my recollection was people used to have to go into a place and be wired up and stay all night, which always struck me as weird. How do you sleep normally when you're not in your own bed?
Right.
you got wires. But talk to me about what's happening
Right.
and how to
Right. So
diagnose.
that test, though, is not a sleep test. I mean, it is a sleep apnea test. There is still, of course, the tried and true in lab study that we still do, and we do for many
I
reasons.
see.
We will do it if we will do it for sleep apnea, even so. We'll do it for the CPAP, which is the treatment, one of the main treatments for sleep apnea. We'll do it for that as well in the lab. We'll do it for some intractable cases of insomnia to see what's going on and uncover what's going on. Sometimes there's other behaviors occurring during sleep, what we call
Mm.
parasomnias. So now we're in another grouping of sleep disorders, which mean other things happening during sleep, like
Mm.
sleepwalking, sleep talking. That's not really a problem, though. Or REM sleep behavior disorder. That's a problem. REM sleep behavior disorder is happening during this REM sleep, and the
Mm.
person is not paralyzed. So they are moving around during REM and usually acting out their dream. They can hurt a bed partner, they can hurt themselves. Yeah, there have been some really scary and
I
dangerous
think you
cases.
told me once about an expert witness case you were consulted around where somebody was sleepwalking and committed
Right.
violence.
Yeah. There was the question of that. Usually with non-REM sleep, which sleepwalking happens during non-REM, not during REM, because we're paralyzed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there have been cases where people have actually gotten off murder, um, you know, uh, yeah, because they said that they had
Because they weren't
parasomnias. Yeah,
conscious, they were really in another dimension or whatever. I want to circle back to the apparatuses that I see advertised, the rings and the Fitbits and other things. Talk to me about your perspective
right.
on all of these consumer good
Uh-huh.
things.
Well, it's like any technology. There are the positives and benefits, and there's also the negatives and cons of it. And a lot of them are sort of proposing that they do more than they really do. So while I think that they can help people, they are not great at actually recording sleep stages. Forget about. They may come up with this amount deep sleep, this amount light sleep, this amount REM. And even if you're in a lab with the electrodes where we're actually really recording EEG and all the aspects of that we measure sleep, we don't even know sometimes what stage you're in. It's
Mm.
that it's sort of that kind of complicated. But so I wouldn't use one of these the watches or the Aura rings or those to measure how much deep sleep you're getting every night. I could use them
Mm-hmm.
to see how much sleep you're getting and whether you're keeping a regular schedule of sleep. I think they're good for that.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
there are other indicators. Heart rate. It probably also does a very good job but sleep in particular, I think we're not quite there yet at really them being reliable measures of sleep. And I
Mm.
also say to people,
Mm.
why do you need to know that? Because you don't really
Mm.
know what to do with that information.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. Yeah, so I guess I'm more wondering about just the consumerism piece and also just, is it true that when you're in deep sleep your heart rate slows down or not necessarily?
Um, well, so, again, there's the question of what's deep sleep. Um, there's slow wave sleep, which is non-REM sleep. And yes, your heart rate does slow down during that
Mm-hmm.
stage. But there's REM sleep where your heart rate is just more variable. So it speeds
Mm-hmm.
up, it slows down. There's more sympathetic activity going on during REM sleep. So
Mm-hmm.
certainly heart rate has been used to stage different stages of sleep. And like I said, it does
Mm-hmm.
an okay job, but not a great job. And so I think it's one of those things that's dangerous when people start relying too much on their technology for sleep.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm seeing on TV an advertisement for like, you don't need your CPAP anymore. By, I don't even know what the product is, but it just seems really like questionable to me
I'm
if
I'm
somebody's
glad you picked that up
need.
because that's actually a newer technology. It's called Inspire, and
Hmm.
one of the two places that I work at Northwell, we were a beta tester for Inspire. What it is a surgery that you have to undergo, where they implant
Oh,
electrodes in the hypoglossal nerve to stimulate the tongue to basically push the tongue forward during sleep for sleep apnea.
wow.
Yes. But
I didn't understand it was surgical. It looked like it was, a pill or something. It wasn't clear what the heck it was.
and they do that on purpose.
Yeah, I bet.
They make it unclear on purpose to say it's just this miracle and you can throw away your CPAP machine. CPAP is still the gold standard for treating sleep apnea. Now, Inspire can
Hmm.
work for some people, but you have to be
Hmm.
evaluated, go to an ENT doctor, and understand where the collapse is occurring during the night for you to see if you're a candidate for Inspire.
And is it true that if people have obesity, they're going to maybe have a higher prevalence of sleep apnea?
Yeah. I mean, obesity is one of the risk factors because anything that will pull on the back of the throat to close it is going to be a risk factor. And probably also
Hmm.
there are metabolic reasons why it's also a risk factor too. Yeah. But
Hmm.
interestingly, also having sleep apnea or a sleep problem, even insomnia, is a risk factor for obesity.
Mm, that's so interesting.
Yeah.
We are like biopsychosocial beings and we really are embodied minds, and we're still learning so much and hopefully we'll know more. But in the meantime, a lot of people just are working too hard and not sleeping well and worrying too much and haven't developed a really good toolbox of strategies for how to do well. Like, for example, I realized a few years ago that if I have a heavy meal at 7 and I'm going to bed at 10, I'm not going to sleep as well as if I eat at 6 or at 5. I just don't my It takes longer, I guess, for my metabolism to absorb the food. So, it creates problems when people want to go out for 8 o'clock meal, but I know I'm going to eat earlier. I'll snack at
Mm.
8 and keep people company. But it's an adjustment. But I know I'm true to my body. I want my body to be happy with me and
Yep.
not fight with me.
Absolutely. Um, I often tell people that imagine that you were living in cave people time and the kinds of things
Yeah.
that we had to do then. And our bodies are still
Mm-hmm.
built that way. So, yeah, we didn't have the luxury of going downstairs and, going to the refrigerator, having a snack, or eating later. We had to eat earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and
Right.
we had to go in our cave and it had to be dark. Maybe there was a little fire going for a little while, but it was essentially dark. And then we had to get out at the break of dawn to, survive, to do everything we had to
Right.
do to get food and keep our, family going. So really that's
Right.
the way we're built. And we violate it in a lot of ways and sometimes we get away with some of them. But, it is that easy.
Yeah, incandescent lights have changed the psychology and everything with the human species. Talk about Eastern Daylight Time, and what's your take? Should we get rid of it or what?
Right. So I actually recently did a bit for Eyewitness News on this because I guess, well, it is a controversial topic, and we just obviously sprung forward. We lost an hour,
Forward.
but
Yeah.
we did that for daylight savings. So what does that mean? So obviously we all
Mm,
understand that in the spring and summer that the days start stretching out. And I think it was actually during the wartime with FDR that they actually went to daylight savings to save
mm,
money. They thought it helped with more daylight hours for heating and for energy, that it was better to sort of make it later. But it turns out that's not so great. Well, the worst part of going back is going back and forth between
mm-hmm,
daylight savings and standard. So a
mm-hmm.
lot of things can happen during those transitions, like the Monday and Tuesday after. We call the Monday that just happened when we sprung forward Sleepy Monday, because people typically lose an hour of sleep
Mm-hmm.
on that Sunday night because their bodies are not ready to go to bed an hour earlier.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Right.
so anyway, but standard time seems to be more in sync with what our bodies are actually sort of programmed, our circadian rhythms are programmed to do. And so, if
Mm-hmm.
so, even though there is like a move now, I think is it in the Congress or Senate? I think actually Senate
Yeah.
to keep us one thing the whole year, but they want to go to daylight savings. It'd be better if we could go to standard time because the morning is going to be a problem for kids getting to school.
Uh,
There's accidents. There was the whole thing that happened when they did try to do it, and kids were hit by cars while waiting for buses.
mm.
So that could be a problem.
And anyway, I think young people do better to go to school later anyway, in terms of they need more sleep, right?
They need more sleep, and especially teenagers, teenagers, their rhythm. So this is another thing about circadian rhythms. Our rhythm changes throughout our lifetime too. So when we're younger, our rhythm is advanced. So we get sleepier earlier and we get up earlier, but we're also sleeping
Mm-hmm.
longer. So we're not getting up that much earlier. But that's, like a 6, 7, 8 year old. When we start
Mm-hmm.
getting to be adolescents, 12, 13, 14, our rhythm delays. So now instead of getting sleepy, that window of sleepiness from our circadian rhythm occurs later. And it
Mm.
starts even overshooting what it becomes as an adult because it's a rhythm
Interesting.
and so it might be 11, 12, 1, and they're on their devices
Mm.
and they're in social media and they're talking to their friends. So they
Mm.
delay and they really want to go to sleep later, and they go to sleep later, and they still have to get up early for school. So they're
Yeah.
very sleep deprived.
Yeah. So, this is such a vital part of being a human being. What is it? A third of our life we are sleeping, or something
Yep.
like that. But I can't help but go back to my personal story and how I was rescued from the Moonies was because I fell asleep at the wheel of a Moonie van. And what I came to understand is while we have laws around drunk driving, there are no laws around driving sleepy. But in fact, people may have micro sleep while they're driving and like have a crash. And unlike when you're drunk, your body gets loose, you can like really be harmed even more. Is that correct? Am I understand
Yeah.
correctly?
I mean, look, we have regulations as we should for amount of alcohol in our system. And it turns out that sleep deprivation, when someone is sleep deprived, some of the deficits we have are similar to when we are
Mm.
drunk. And
Mm-hmm.
so it is a question about how we should monitor sleepiness and driving and
Mm-hmm.
safety.
Mm-hmm.
And certainly those who have narcolepsy, they are, they are regulated in terms of whether they can drive. They're tested, and sometimes they cannot drive. Is it?
I had a client who had narcolepsy. Explain for my listeners what that condition is.
So narcolepsy is a rare sleep disorder, but it is one where the hallmark symptom is daytime sleepiness. So they are sleepy, but not sleepy the whole day. They have, it sort of comes and it goes. They're sleepy, they're awake. They're sleepy, they're awake. And they might have micro sleeps or, sleep for a little bit. But as it turns out, they also don't sleep well at night. So what we've come to understand is it's really an instability of the sleep-wake system.
I was going to say, my recollection of my client was that when she laughed hard, she fell asleep. Like she had to keep herself from laughing hard. And I have no idea if that was like idiosyncratic or a feature of narcolepsy.
Right. So, like I said, narcolepsy the hallmark is sleepiness, but there is another symptom, which is cataplexy. And what happens with cataplexy, and it doesn't happen to everybody, there's subgroups of narcoleptics, but is their muscle tone, which is something that happens in REM sleep. You become paralyzed in REM sleep. Well, this is happening while they're awake. So they they lose muscle tone, and it happens with strong emotion, and it happens when you laugh. And you can collapse, or just some parts of your body actually lose muscle tone. And so people with it avoid strong emotion.
Yeah.
It's very sad. It happens more with laughing, but it can happen with crying. It can happen with, just surprise. Emotion.
Yeah, we are emotional beings, aren't we?
Yes. What's one of the striking things about sleep disorders is anything that can go wrong does.
But hopefully, as science progresses and we have more and more data, we can figure out what the mechanisms are and personalize and customize approaches that can help people.
And I will say that we know a lot about now the sleep pathways because of technological advances in research. We're able to understand the pathways of sleep. We now know the orexin receptors in the hypothalamus that are involved in the on-off switch of sleep to wake and wake to sleep. Because wake has always got to be a priority. We always have to wake to, run away from the saber-toothed tiger. So that's the challenge we have. But technology has allowed us to treat, if not cure, at this point, treat a lot of these sleep disorders. So while I'm explaining all these, I'm realizing that I'm not saying we can do a lot about this as well, because we really can.
Yeah. People consult an expert. And I think starting with a 2-week sleep log is a really great idea, even maybe before you consult with someone like Dr. Broch is a great thing. I really want to just ask you a couple more things and then we'll wrap up. So I have a dear friend, John Atak, ex-Scientologist. He and family members suffer from delayed phase sleep disorder. And he's consulted with the top experts in the UK and has read everything. And he basically just goes, he goes to sleep at 4 a.m. and he wakes up at noon. And it works for him. And he's brilliant, but it's just an oddity of his life and his kids. Some of his kids have it too. Tell us about that.
Right. So again, back to circadian rhythms, most of us are going to be in sync with the light and dark cycle and can reset in the morning. But what we understand, there's always a small percentage, again, this distribution. And probably there was a reason why we needed people to have delayed sleep phases, because they were the ones that could keep watch at nighttime.
Survival.
Yeah. And so for them, they don't either reset or they just have a delayed phase. And kind of 3 or 4 a.m. is the very kind of classic time that they will fall asleep. And because
Mm-hmm.
it's 3 or 4, they're going to sleep 7 to 8 hours, and it's going to be 11 to 12 to 1.
Yep.
And you can advance someone to some extent, but never to be someone that'll be an 11 to 6 or 7 sleeper. And for some people, it just works for them to sleep on that rhythm.
Yeah, he has tried it all and would love for there to be a solution because he's married to someone who doesn't have it. But um, he's just is true to his body and what he needs, and he's a dear man. So I wanted to just ask in case there's any other thoughts about that. So as we wrap up, I want to ask your summary wisdom. We need 7 to 9 hours sleep. Sleep hygiene is really crucial. There are things people should learn about and do. Give us a final summary of about this very vital topic.
Sure. Well, I think, you captured some of it right there. What I would also add to that is um, emotions are very important. As we understand, probably a big part of sleep is to form memory, is to regenerate the things we need to for the next day to survive. Um, and for our emotions to make us feel safe and happy.
Mm,
So
mm,
I also encourage people during the daytime to really try to enjoy their day, because that a
mm,
happy day will is more likely to go into a better night's sleep. And of course, a better
yeah.
night's sleep is also, will translate into a better day. So they're bidirectional. And our mood is
Mm-hmm,
important in our sleep, and our sleep is important in our mood. So we certainly
mm-hmm.
understand
That's
that.
great. And one other thing that you taught me years ago about napping is good, but don't do it after 3 p.m. Like keep it like earlier in the afternoon, half hours, power nap or something
Yes.
is something that's okay.
Yes, we are the only animal that doesn't nap, and probably, we could benefit from it, or some people can. But you can't
Mm-hmm,
do it late, and right, you can't do it for, don't make it hours. It should be no more than an hour. Yes. But
mm-hmm.
also, if you're
Great.
having problems, seek help. There is help.
Yes.
Sleep disorder centers, that's what they're there for. That's what I'm here for. That's what, they're all over the world. And some resources are the American Sleep Medicine Association. Behavioral
Mm-hmm,
sleep medicine is another one. The National
mm-hmm.
Sleep Foundation is another one.
And a question, if people are not in New York to see you in person, can they do a telehealth consult with you? I saw you're listed at Psychology Today as one of the licensed experts. Is that
Yeah,
something that's possibly worthwhile?
absolutely. They can certainly get in touch with me through my Psychology Today contact information. And if I can't see them, I certainly can make recommendations, also for other behavioral sleep medicine specialists.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Lauren Broch.
Thank you.
It's you've taught me over the decades, so I probably wound up talking more than I had planned to, but my brain was getting stimulated as you were talking. All I can say is sleep is vital, and we need it for our immune system and learning. And all I can say is really make it a priority. You'll feel better, you'll be smarter, you'll remember more, you'll be able to concentrate more, and stay off your cell phones late at night, please, before you go to sleep, and enjoy
Amen.
your rest. Thank you so
All
much,
right.
Dr.
Thank
Lauren
you.
Broch.
Thank
Take
you,
care.
Steve.